Today on CityCast DC, crime in DC is down. And after a couple of years of nonstop alarm about how it went up, there is not a lot of certainty about why it has now gone in the other direction. We are talking to Lindsey Appiah, DC's Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, about her theory of the case and what she thinks we need to do now. Today is Monday, August 5th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hi, Lindsey. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
You spent the past couple of years parrying a lot of questions about bad news, but statistically, we've got some fairly good news in DC right now, which is that sort of across the board in a bunch of different measures, crime is down. And I guess I have the same question as I did when crime was up, which is why? Why has it gone down?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you've heard the mayor say over the past year as things were going up. And one of the things we talk a lot about is that crime and public safety is an ecosystem, and it is very interdependent on all parts of our systems working. So when one part gets out of whack, you see outcomes. And so one of the things that the mayor said a lot last year was that the accountability arm of our system had gotten a bit out of balance, and that there were a number of things that we needed to do to rebalance ourselves. And so you saw a lot of policy proposals. The mayor put forth the Safer, Stronger Amendment Act. We worked together with Councilmember Pinto on the Prioritizing Public Safety Emergency Amendment Act. The mayor put forth the Act Now Amendment Act in October, and then Secure DC bill, which passed in, I think it was March. And so policy is one piece that really, enforcement, prevention, our violence interrupters, everybody working together. And one of the things you'll really hear is in a coordinated fashion, which is really my responsibility to make sure the entire system was working, has really helped us to continue to see the sustained reductions that we're seeing currently.
Yeah, but with laws, it takes a while. Are we saying that the bills are just working super fast?
I would say yes, that one of the calculations that we made and what we said is that we have to make very pragmatic changes that we believed would have immediate impact on behavior. And so some of the changes were a signal to community and also our criminal justice system partners about where we needed to be. I said it last year when I testified at the Safer, Stronger Amendment Act that the district is reform-minded and we are absolutely at the forefront of criminal justice reform, but that means we didn't have a lot of comparators as to what the outcomes of some of these changes would be. And once we did see in our own system what happened, we needed to make some changes. So there are some things which absolutely had immediate impact. Pretrial detention.
Just for people who don't know, that means you get arrested and you don't get to go out on bail.
That's right. So being held while you're awaiting trial. And for us, particularly for violent offenses, we had seen about a 700-person drop in the numbers at our jail, some of that pandemic related and just sort of extending on, while also seeing a historic drop in our number of officers, about 500 to 600 fewer officers, while also seeing an increase in the number of guns that we were recovering. So the pretrial detention portions really were about 1,900, which pre-pandemic was our normal number and balance. I think that particular provision was a signal to our criminal justice system partners about where the community was. And in fact, that people showed up so strongly for these provisions, which is why we proposed them to begin with, really did impact behavior. As more people were being held, we always say that this is a partnership, and our community really started to feel safe to once again provide information to MPD to help us close cases quickly, which really we know actually helps to affect crime numbers. So I would say absolutely that some of the provisions are more longer term, but that we were really trying to be pragmatic in policy and implement things that we thought would have an immediate impact, and we're seeing that.
So I think a lot of people had a sense that crime spiked during or right after the pandemic. Can you compare the stats you've got for this year with where things were pre-pandemic, like 2019?
Sure. Yeah, so obviously we look at last year where we're down 35% in violent crime, but we have to look at pre-pandemic. So with violent crime, we are down 13% compared to 2019. Overall crime down 14% compared to 2019. So again, even down compared to our pre-pandemic years. Same if you were to look at 2018, we actually are lower in violent crime and total crime as compared to 2018. So some of it, you see kind of all over the place where they're saying, well, maybe you're just returning to kind of the norm, right? Like the pre-pandemic norm. We're seeing, yes, that's the case, but actually we are seeing decreases below that. So we really know that a lot of the policy changes, the policing changes, the partnerships are really working to help us even reduce beyond just kind of the return to whatever pre-pandemic norms were.
So do you have a sense of, I mean, in the rest of the country, this pattern that we've experienced happened in lots and lots of big cities. Washington, for some reason, took a lot longer than some of those cities to come down. Do you have a sense of why that is? I realize this is all like very hard to compare exactly.
Well, and so the thing is, so in 2022, our homicides actually had reduced a bit from the 2021 spike everyone had, and then it spiked up. And so we kind of asked the same question, well, why were we going down when other people were going up? I think that, it takes a little bit of time for all sorts of things to kind of come together at once. The things that happen post-pandemic, change behavior, some of the law changes, we had a number of significant law changes that kind of kicked in right at the end of 2022 that we really saw an impact in 2023 on policing and some other things that we made proposals to be like, hey, we don't know that this is not going to help us to reduce crime. And so I think there's that. Like I said, we are at the forefront of reform, and that over time, a lot of the changes that we made just kind of came together in a perfect storm, really, in 2023.
I mean, it's going to sound like a dumb question, but do you have any sense of why does crime go up or down?
Some of it's mystery, but this is studied, right? Like, we certainly need more studies. And you've heard the White House say that gun violence is a public health issue. And so we could use more research dollars there. But a lot of crime is local, and you have to look at what's happening in your community. There are some collective things. Everybody saw increases in car theft, which also factors into that number, right? Like significant because of things like the Kia challenge on TikTok. So while we're seeing some of those numbers come down, they're still higher than pre-pandemic. So that's kind of a cultural.
Car theft is way higher than it was in 2019.
That's correct. Yeah.
So you're saying that's sort of in the culture right now and maybe in technology.
In technology and in culture and in, our young people who learned how to steal cars. Because the interesting thing, if you were to look at theft from auto was significantly down because pre-pandemic, people couldn't steal the whole car. It seems like they stole from the car. So it's kind of like a swap now. Now they're able to steal the vehicle. And so our theft from auto numbers are significantly lower than what they were pre-pandemic. And so there's
why steal the radio if you can steal the car?
The whole car, right? Like this. So there's some cultural things that happened during the pandemic that kind of helped those things along. But I mean, there's a whole host of things that go into kind of city crime. We are a complex jurisdiction in the district that have a very, very unique federal and local system, which I know you've talked about, right? Like the challenges of that. So for us, judicial vacancies, one of the things you'll hear is the certainty of and swiftness of kind of getting a consequence for behavior is really critical to crime reduction. Well, in the district, we had lots of judicial vacancies. I know you're, right, like have actually written about that. And so that combined with, decreases in numbers of police, which is nationwide. But in D.C., where you see, like last month, we had NATO, we had the prime minister visit, we had all of these very significant national events with more First Amendment activity than ever before and lower numbers of officers and still having to handle that. So there's some things that are universal, more guns across our country, way too many guns, and change behavior where people are willing to use them, mixed with some unique challenges that the district has, but that we really are working together to overcome.
Summer's not over yet. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week brings the eats from August 12th through the 18th at hundreds of locations across the DMV, offering amazing 3-course menus for lunch and dinner and brunch. It's a great time to dine out at a favorite eatery or indulge your culinary curiosity and try something new. There's an awesome variety of cuisines to explore and menu options to fit all palates. Many locations are also offering cocktail and wine pairings to further elevate your dining experience. And as a special treat for the summer promotion, you can feed your adventurous side with delicious American lamb dishes at select locations. Just look for the patriotic lamb on listings at rwdmv.com, where you can find the full list of participating restaurants, view menus, and book your reservations. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week is presented by RAMW and Events DC.
So the idea is that violent crime is concentrated. Why is it so hard to target?
It is true that violent crime tends to be concentrated in areas. And one of the things that our former Chief Kantz used to say is that the pain is not the same necessarily everywhere, right? Like that some of the communities that experience the highest amounts of violence, it does tend to be concentrated there. The challenges are the things that you know, that we have to address the acute needs, the shootings and the immediacy of crime. But then there are root cause issues that we really believe that you also have to address that are difficult. Concentrated poverty, the effects of systemic racism and what that's brought. And those are not fast fixes, right? Like those are longer term. Crew-based disputes, right, that drive, some of the gun violence here in the district and in other big cities, right? Those are not easy to just resolve. And
we've talked in here about social media as an accelerant for interpersonal disputes.
That's right. And the rise of social media, of new channels where people were very tuned into it, like TikTok, where people are challenging it, and Instagram Live. These are tools that really took off in a lot of ways during the pandemic and have led to they're like an incinerant on kind of simmering disputes that could have been mediated if you have a little bit more time. And so we're working on that with violence interruption and new technology on how we monitor social media. But certainly we're looking for our federal entities. I know there was a recent, I think it was Senator Blumenthal, for the protection of children in online spaces. And so there's a lot of things that would help us there. But
it's much more old school. In February, DC enacted this safe commercial corridor hub in Chinatown, which is one of those phrases, because presumably, you're the deputy mayor for public safety, all commercial corridor hubs should be safe. But what does that do and how's it panning out?
We believe in the district that public safety is both, there's public safety and law enforcement tools, but there's also public health, that some of what is causing really the feeling of lack of safety, which to us, perception is reality, right? So you really do have to address that, is some of the lifestyle things like homelessness and poverty and cleanliness and all of those things that really impact how people feel about safety. So what we believe is that you have to bring everybody together to work together. So creating a space where community can visibly see their government, MPD, our social service agencies, and creating a space they can then work together and out of is an effective model for really being in community and addressing the issues that are local to that community. One of the things we did there, we launched a second one in Anacostia, but what we saw in Chinatown, which I would say it launched in February, but if you look at year over year, the crime in Chinatown total is down 44% when you compare it with last year. And we think it's all of the things. When you go over there, our partners with the bid have community safety ambassadors, because everything isn't about policing. Some of it is about engagement, who really help to be eyes and ears and help us to know, hey, are there mental health challenges that we really could use our mental health providers to do some outreach? Are there just cleanliness issues where we really should be out power washing because, there's graffiti or other things that lend to a lack of feeling of safety. And so it's been really effective in helping us to be really multidisciplinary and comprehensive in our approaches to public safety.
So another piece of that Secure DC Act you mentioned, and it as a child of the 80s in DC, it brought back old times, was this idea of drug-free zones, that police can set up temporary drug-free zones to crack down on illegal sales. I've always associated that phrase with sort of ineffectual signage. What does that actually allow? I mean, presumably they should be cracking down on illegal sales always. So what does that actually allow, and what's been how's the community responded? Where are you guys doing it?
So this is not the 80s versions, right, like of drug crackdowns. This was 96 to 2014. These existed in the District of Columbia. And really, this was more about the reclamation of public space. MPD is always working on, it's against the law to just sell drugs openly. But we also know you have to build good cases, and sometimes that takes time. And in the meantime, we were seeing sort of a growing number of what back in the mid 2000s were open air drug markets, where people then are not able to really utilize the spaces in their community because there are drug sales or use going on in those spaces. And so what I said, and this is really true in Chinatown, what I said is when we made these proposals, it was 100% based upon what we were hearing from communities across the district. And I promise you, as one who was out in the street all over the district last year, listening to people about how they felt, people were very passionate about our need to break up these areas where they just didn't feel safe to even pass on the sidewalk. And so this has been incredibly popular provisions that have really allowed people to do what we expected. It is not about arresting people. We always say we can't arrest our way out. It is about breaking up activities so that people can reclaim space. And again, they have been very, very successful in doing that. It's, there are some arrests, but by and large, people are compliant when MPD is like, hey, this is a drug-free zone, you need to move on. And the people are like, well, won't they just come back? Sometimes, but not as much as people think.
So I've heard the accolades. There was also some reporting in the Post about allegations of police using it as an excuse to stop people even after the zone's expired. I'm curious, like when a zone is active, what are police able to do that they can't do in an area that's not been declared a drug-free zone?
So one of the things is I'm a lawyer, right? And so in thinking about these, I did a lot of, we want to be constitutional in everything that we do. And so there was concerns before about stop and frisk and all these things, which haven't really materialized, because what the officers will do is say, hey, listen, this is a drug-free zone. If you're engaged in certain activity, which primarily is the use of drugs, that's the main thing, right? Like, because obviously if you're selling drugs, that's against the law. But using drugs in spaces, it's like, you cannot do that here. You need to move along. Because one of the things you would see a good amount, I think with the pandemic, with the removal of kind of us from society, people tended to take spaces. You would see people in lawn chairs, sitting, drinking, using drugs, various things that made it difficult for community to have that space as a place where they could walk, gather, feel safe on their porches or otherwise. And so really, it gives the officers an opportunity to say, hey, you need to move along here. Like, you can't do that. You can't take public space to engage in this conduct.
Do you mean cannabis? Because the other ones are still illegal.
So it's really specifically spelled out in the statute, because it's not just people drinking or, smoking cigarettes or gathering or congregating. It really is to engage in unlawful activity. So you're right. It is still unlawful to sit and use cocaine or to sell cocaine or otherwise. So they're just enforcing what is already basically unlawful activity, but that they can't necessarily arrest for. One of the things that we know is that there are a lot of misdemeanor drug activity that occurs that will not result in people getting a sentence or otherwise, where arresting really is not an effective tool of addressing that issue, right? But it doesn't mean that the issue is that it is not unlawful or that it's acceptable in community. And this really gives MPD an opportunity to address that type of conduct that we know will not result necessarily in prosecution, but that is leading to a lack of feeling of safety for community.
So I think what you're saying is it gives them the power to sort of chase out people without having to worry about, can we make a case against this guy? We just want immediately for this person to not be here because it makes the rest of the neighborhood feel unsafe.
I mean, it's in somewhat, right? But it's a little bit more stringent than that, because we don't just want people to be chased out of community, because some are our community. And certainly one of the parameters is that we'll work with outreach workers, right? Because our goal is also to connect people to services. which is why one of the notification pieces is that there's notice made to social service providers before to see if we can get people, our goal is always to connect people to treatment, just so people are aware. We started a stabilization center. Like, we don't want people at DC jail for things they don't need to be.
And if an officer tells me, move along, and I say, no, I want to stay here, the officer is then able to find me, arrest me, ticket me?
That's correct.
Got it. So the other big initiative this year is this real-time crime center, and they have invited, the police chief has invited the public to private businesses to link up their cameras to the city's cameras. It's early days yet, but do you have a sense of how that's impacting crime and in what ways it impacts it?
I do. It has had an immediate impact on crime. Immediate. Prior to us building our real-time crime center, we being me, the chief, had visited a number of other jurisdictions that have real-time crime centers to see, to learn, to build upon what they were doing. And it was our sense, one of the things that we know is we needed to utilize technology. We do not have the force strength that we once had, and we're working to build our force strength back up. But this was an opportunity for us to say, how can we leverage technology that's out there to really increase our effectiveness in closing cases quickly? Because as I said previously, that is one of the long studied and said ways that you deter crime is the surety of consequence, right? And so, this has been immediate, like case after case where by having access, by being able to basically pull up cameras and to see what's happening in the field as soon as a crime is reported, our detectives and analysts who are in the real-time crime center are then able to work with patrol like quickly versus after the fact. Previously, what we did, and we certainly had joint operations centers that we used sometimes, but a lot of what we did was get video and things after the fact, right? Like, there's a crime, we go out and ask the community to provide us with video. The Real-Time Crime Center is helping us to be able to quickly put out much higher quality photos and lookouts immediately. You'll see for vehicles, for persons of interest, that really are helping us to much more quickly close cases. And so whether it's that or we recently got a new helicopter, the Falcon, we started our UAS or drone program. These are all things which are helping us to close cases. And by close cases, I mean make an arrest, which is helping to bring much swifter justice. The other thing is just the technology is better. So it also provides our prosecutors with better pieces of evidence, right? Like higher quality video, more surety of that we've apprehended the right people, the ability to make cases that they really believe will help to bring justice to victims. So all the way around, the tips that we're getting from community, the cameras, even just the ability to automatically have them upload camera footage without kind of the arduous process of canvassing and that previously happened, is just been invaluable.
So I'm curious, you say you go out in the community a lot, and my read of city politics the last few years has been, we came through this moment of a lot of energy around reform and anger at police. We also have come through this period of a lot of people feeling like there's elements of the city political establishment that weren't really listening to them about crime concerns, or saying, you're a Karen if you complain about this stuff. I'm curious what, when you go to community meetings and stuff, what do people ask you about? What do they give you a hard time about?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's true is that DC is a leader and is the capital of the United States of America. We are proud of that, but we're also a local city. And so I think there's a way in which it's important for us to really lead and be responsive to national movements, but we also have to keep in mind of what's really happening in our city. That certainly there were always areas of improvement for our police department, but that we didn't have the same lack of trust maybe that other places have, because we have, and I'll say this, the Metropolitan Police Department, I have spoken to many who have thoughts on police departments, is the best police department in the country. And I don't just say that. They're incredibly disciplined. They have to be very clear about constitutional bounds, and also we are swift when it comes to accountability for officers, because it's what we have to be. We have to have the best police department in the country because of everything that happens here. So I think it's always important that we did hear our residents last year were like, listen, we appreciate this is a smart, sophisticated, involved, active group of people in our city at every level. They believe in reform. They believe in holistic solutions to crime, but people just want to live well. They want to be able to raise their families here. They want to feel safe when they go for walks. They don't want to feel like they're going to be carjacked if they're in their vehicles. And that's not unreasonable. So we, as those who sit in these local seats, who sit as really public servants and the ones who are tasked with serving our public, have to be responsive to what is happening not only nationally, but locally, what's happening here, and making sure that we're tailoring the interventions to really what's happening here. And that's why we had to recalibrate a bit, because in leading nationally in reform, we may have gotten out of whack in really addressing what was happening locally.
Before I let you go, do you guys got anything big updates coming down the pike?
No. When things are working, one of the tendencies is for people to like change you start changing everything. You're like, this is working. No, we are kind of holding where we are. Obviously, we've had a ton of national events, and we have the election coming up and inauguration. We're always kind of looking across our space to see are there things that we can do different, but no big changes.
How worried are you about the public safety implications of the election season?
I'm not worried because we've been preparing, right? Like we have been preparing for a good amount of time with our federal partners, from all of our law enforcement partners to the Department of Defense to, the Hill, to everybody, to make sure that we have a safe and secure period from the election all the way through inauguration. And so,
I mean, MPD had to step up on January 6th in ways other forces did not. What are you saying? What you mentioned partners, so we shouldn't expect a repeat of MPD having to fill the gaps that shouldn't have been there.
So MPD is always going to be lead, right? Like the mayor will say, regardless of who is responsible for what, we are the district and we are responsible. So no matter what, MPD is always going to step up. And that's kind of true across our system, with our public safety and justice system. We are going to step up. So certainly MPD always will play a critical role in all of the preparations. We have the size and expertise to really handle First Amendment well. But we have been working and drilling and practicing and doing various things with our federal partners who've made a number of changes since January 6th. And certainly the administration has been this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has been real partners in ensuring that the district, we're in lockstep in ensuring the safety of all of these things. So you always prepare for whatever the worst may be, but I fully expect that we will have a safe, secure election season and inauguration.
Lindsey Appiah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, consider becoming a member. Starting today, all members are getting a brand new perk with events for the full week. If you want in, sign up at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.